Yeah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we're going to make this quick. We're just going to be responding to Testify's response to my response. So, inshallah, we're just going to keep it quick. Um, I'll just quickly show his article before we begin. But yeah, it's pretty much on the argument that he likes to bring, where it's just about, oh, well, give me a Muslim prior to Islam between the time of Jesus, peace be upon him, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, I gave him obviously the Ebionites as one example. You know, Jewish Christians that upkept the law, they didn't believe in the divinity of Jesus, and a group of them believed in the virgin birth. So they upheld to these sort of fundamental Islamic ideas. So we can show like continuity there. But yeah, essentially, he gave a article response to my video, and inshallah, we're just going to go through it quickly. You know, I don't have enough time to make a video in response or an article, but I just grabbed some sources quickly after skimming through it, and inshallah, we can just discuss whether his response is sufficient or not. So basically, his article is titled "Deen Response Fails at the Muslim Challenge," and this was uploaded a couple of days ago. So he starts off by saying, guys, I'm living in Dean's Head. The rent is free, but the view is terrible. Here's his video response to me on the question no Muslim can answer. Well, the thing is, if you're living in my head rent free, you know what that means, right? I'm just a reaction to Islamophobes and like poor critiques like yourself. If I'm constantly having to make videos on you, what does that mean? It means that you're obsessed with Islam. So by that logic, you're just obsessed with Islam. I'm just a reaction to that. Yeah, so basically that's my video. I give my response. I'll put the link in the description, inshallah, to check that out. And his original video is neither one of these ones. It's a different one. And he says, first Deen response says, I've refuted myself by using an argument from silence against Islam, but not applying it consistently to the way I defend the New Testament. But let's get this straight. No arguments from silence are created equal. I've never claimed all arguments from silence are fallacious. Okay, well, one thing to discuss here is the fact that I never made that claim. What I said was you're being inconsistent because you brought the fact that it's an argument from silence, despite in past videos you've said that arguments from silence is a precarious way to argue, and you followed the fact that you said it's a precarious way to argue, meaning it's doesn't have much foundations in argumentation. You follow that with examples where you would expect there to be evidence, right? So the whole point is that you're trying to show within your video, which I'll pull up now, that despite there being cases where you expect there to be evidence, there's still cases where arguments from silence still don't work because they're not absolute. And we can show that right now, even just from my video response. So let me share that quickly. Okay. So essentially, he starts off by saying that an argument from silence is a precarious way to argue, and look at how he gives examples where you would expect it to be evidence, and yet your intuition, the fact that you expect it to be evidence, still leads you to the wrong conclusion.
In logic, an argument from silence is a pattern of reasoning
Maybe I should make this louder.
in which the failure to mention a fact or event in a known source is used to draw an inference, usually to the conclusion that the supposed fact is false or that the supposed event didn't actually happen. It's not always necessarily fallacious, but at best, it's a pretty precarious way to argue.
Okay, there you go. So he says it's not necessarily fallacious. I included that in my video and I recognize that. And yet he says it's still a pretty precarious way to argue. I already know arguments from silence aren't inherently fallacious. I already know this. You didn't need to teach me this. Like, it's already something I know. I literally brought this up in my debate against Chris, right? What does he go on to do after he says it's a pretty precarious way to argue? He starts giving examples where your intuition, where you would expect there to be evidence, the reality goes against that notion. So let's play that.
But often our expectations and reality are two very different things. Exactly how reliable is our intuition at predicting whether a writer would mention a fact or event that did really happen? As it turns out, not that great. By looking at some examples, I think you will see that we tend to vastly overestimate ourselves. Let's take a look. Neither Herodotus nor Thucydides provide any report of Rome or the Romans in their histories of ancient Greece. That seems to be quite the oversight. In Thucydides' history, Socrates isn't mentioned. This is despite the fact that he may have been considered one of the most important characters in Athens during the 20 years covered in his work. Thucydides himself doesn't appear in Aristotle or Xenophon. We have to wait about 250 years for Polybius to mention Thucydides. In two long letters to Tacitus, Pliny the Younger describes the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in great detail. However, quite weirdly, he doesn't mention the destruction of the cities of Herculaneum or Pompeii.
Okay, I think you guys get the point. The point is that he's giving cases where you would expect there to be evidence, right? So even in a case where an argument from silence is not fallacious, it's still not absolute, and he's making that very point, right? So he's saying that despite it not being fallacious in certain circumstances, he still says it's what? It's a pretty precarious way to argue. So let's replay that one more time.
Scholars are using textbook examples of the argument from silence. In logic, an argument from silence is a pattern of reasoning in which the failure to mention a fact or event in a known source is used to draw an inference, usually to the conclusion that the supposed fact is false or that the supposed event didn't actually happen. It's not always necessarily fallacious, but at best, it's a pretty precarious way to argue.
Okay. He recognizes it's not necessarily fallacious, but even when it's not fallacious, it's a pretty precarious way to argue. Okay. Like, he has to strawman what I'm saying and what he said in order for him to respond. Bert, I don't need you to teach me that an argument from silence is not inherently fallacious. I literally schooled your boy on this. Like, your boy had no idea and was like stumbling on his words when I was questioning on him, or questioning him on this particular topic. So yeah, we'll just play that quickly. This is what, 4 months ago, 2 months ago. Well, it's not been long, maybe reaching 3 months. But yeah, pretty much what happens here is I ask Chris the question because my whole argument rests on the fact that I was making an argument from silence, and he pointed out that it was fallacious. So let's play this quickly.
Do you believe that an argument from silence is inherently fallacious, or is it only fallacious in certain conditions?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I don't. To be very direct, yes, you're correct that argument from silence is not necessarily fallacious. It depends on the context.
Right. In what context is it not fallacious?
Where it wouldn't be expected.
Right. Where it wouldn't be expected? No, where it would be expected. You mean it wouldn't be fallacious?
Sorry. Yeah, where it would be expected. Yeah.
Where it would be expected.
Okay, so clearly I do know what argument from silence is, and I know when it's fallacious and not. So don't try to go for cheap shots, Testify. Don't try to like deceive your audience that I don't know what I'm talking about, or I don't recognize these simple things. You're the one that has to strawman what I'm saying and misrepresent your initial point, where you say even though it's not always fallacious, you still admit it's precarious. It's a precarious way to argue. Oh, there you go, man. So you can continue because that's just like the beginning. So he says, a weak argument from silence assumes something didn't happen just because there's no evidence, even when there's no reason to expect evidence. Takes skeptics claiming the massacre of innocents didn't happen because only Matthew mentions it. Bethlehem was a tiny village, and no, so I would argue here even you would expect evidence because in this case you would expect Josephus to record the event, right? So that's why I think that it's in this case it's not even fallacious, to be honest, because Josephus has a work titled The Antiquities of the Jews, where he documents Herod's atrocities, and he documents certain atrocities that pale in comparison to this whole idea that Herod killed a bunch of babies in Bethlehem. So you would expect historical evidence, especially on the part of Josephus, who's a Jewish historian documenting what Herod did. So let's continue. Or the Tard claim that Paul doesn't mention the virgin birth. Yeah, I don't think that's like a good argument, that because Paul doesn't mention. I think Paul even mentions that Jesus is the son of Mary. So that already alludes to the fact that, okay, why are you saying son of Mary and not son of whatever, right? Instead of his father's lineage or whatever it might be, if he didn't believe in the virgin birth. Usually Jewish lineages, you would state their father's lineage, not the fact that they come from their mother. So I already think Paul alludes to the virgin birth anyways. But that's neither here or there. These are examples I've addressed in my videos, but didn't quote mine. No, I didn't quote mine. You literally quote mined yourself in order to misrepresent what you said. I quoted you word for word on what you said, despite at times where this cases where it's not fallacious, it's still a precarious way to argue. That's what you said word for word. So let's not backtrack. Yes, our intuitions about what we'd expect in historical records can be unreliable. Take Pliny the Younger into longer letters to Tacitus. He describes eruption amount. Yeah, so all these examples he said before. It depends on the context and expectations. Yeah, in all the cases that you brought up, you do expect the fact that there's evidence there, and yet you still say, okay, reality doesn't match up with our intuition there. So that was my whole point. So I did understand your initial claim. Now you're just trying to like backtrack and save face. But here's the deal: there's also such a thing as a strong argument from silence, where yeah, literally you just mentioned the strong case of an argument from silence, where you would expect it to be evidence. You gave a whole list of cases where you would expect it to be evidence, and yet you didn't find any evidence, and yet reality goes against our intuition there. So he says, where the absence of evidence screams that something's wrong. It's like saying there's no spider in the room because I don't see one, versus there's no elephant in the room because I don't see one. You might miss the spider, it's small and good at hiding, but if there's no elephant, it's not there. Yeah, I find no issue with that. And that's the huge problem with the Quran's claim about Jesus' followers. In Surah 3, verse 55 and 61:14, the Quran promises that Jesus' true followers would be dominant and superior until the day of resurrection. If that's true, history should. Okay, so I'm pretty sure in his video he does not even mention this point. Okay, so he doesn't even mention this point for his historical argument. If we could just replay that quickly. Okay. Well, I could just go to my response. Okay, let me see if he ever mentions. No, I don't think he ever mentions it. If you mentioned it, you could have made a stronger case, but you can't just like add it now that I've made my response as though you have a point here. So yeah, this does nothing to the response I gave. I responded to the information you gave, satisfactory response, and now you need to add on to your initial video because your initial video doesn't cut it quite clearly. So yeah, doesn't seem like he says it. Okay, let's go back to that. I've got a whole like bunch of tafsirs we can go through for this anyways. But I didn't bring it up in my previous video because he never made this point. The Quran promises that Jesus' true followers would be dominant and superior until the day of resurrection. If that's true, history should at least give us some evidence of this dominant group between 40 and 600 AD. Instead, we find the opposite. The dominant group was Christians who proclaimed Jesus' divinity and crucifixion, beliefs Islam explicitly denies. The absence of these supposed true followers isn't just silence, it's an elephant-sized problem. Okay, the thing is, he didn't make that claim in the video, as I just said. Secondly, if I just reread that, these followers dominant superior into the day's resurrection. If that's true, history should at least give us some evidence. Okay, yeah. So another point is that the video response that I gave, he gives a strict criteria. So I can pull that back up so we could just refresh our memory on that. He gives us a strict criteria and says, okay, if you find this, then you're good, basically, right? So let's pull up that criteria that he brought up. All right, here we go. And now he's adding to it. He's adding to the fact that, oh, these have to be dominant and prominent, right? So he never had this in his initial video. So he's just adding, information to his video, which obviously, like, how am I supposed to respond to that when you're adding after the video is made? So true followers of Allah believe the one simple message, Allah is one. The Ebionites believe this. Jesus was a true prophet of God, a man. Yes, the Ebionites believe this. Jesus was authenticated by his virgin birth and miracles. A group of Ebionites did believe this. Jesus was not executed by the Jews and Romans. That is not a fundamental doctrine that Jesus would have preached, or that the disciples would have taught, or that they would have known. There you go. So I rejected the fourth point, but I fulfilled the other 3 points. There's no reason for me to have to fulfill the fourth point, because that's on expectation from the true followers of Jesus in the first century. Why do I need to grant that point? So I did fulfill all of the requirements that Islamically requires for Jesus' followers to be considered Muslims. Let's pull up Ibn Kathir's quote as well to back up what I was saying. So Ibn that's it, Ibn Kathir, I meant Ibn Taymiyyah. Yeah, so Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah said, if it is said that the disciples, or some of them, or most of the people of the book, used to believe that the Messiah himself was crucified, they were mistaken in that, but this mistake was not something that would undermine their belief. So this is just some random scholar. This is Shaykh al-Islam. Okay. So he mentions this later on in his article, I believe. So we can bring that up. Also, another point. I guess we can bring up. Yeah, we can bring up the proper understanding of those verses. So on chapter, well, I can bring the verses up as well. So it was chapter 3:55 and 61:14. Okay, so we got, just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, here we go. So let's read the verses, then we can give the proper interpretation as per the classical scholars. So 61:14 says, O believers, stand up for Allah, as Jesus, son of Mary, asked the disciples, who will stand up with me for Allah? The disciples replied, we will stand up for Allah. Then a group from the children of Israel believed, while another disbelieved. We then supported the believers against their enemies, so they prevailed. And the other verse is chapter 3, verse 55. Let's just bring that up. Remember when Allah said, O Jesus, I will take you and raise you up to myself. I will deliver you from those who disbelieve and elevate your followers above the disbelievers until the day of judgment. Then to me you will all return and will settle all your disputes. So there's 2 verses being mentioned here, and both of them I have early exegesis from the Salaf mentioned by Baghawi. So let's bring up the interpretations on chapter 3, verse 55. So, well, but before I bring up Baghawi's tafsir, this is a good point I wanted to bring up as well. So I was watching the basically recap after Khalil and Danny's debate with Sam Shamoon, and he was doing it on a Catholic channel, I believe. And there was one Christian that came on with Khalil and actually gave an interpretation of this text, admitting that, on the apparent, from a Muslim's perspective, there's no reason why we would assume this is dominance, or this is the believers being elevated in terms of worldly dominance. So even a Christian admits this. Like, if a Christian doesn't see that, or doesn't admit that this is a plausible reading, then they're just being disingenuous. Even one of their fellow, I believe he's a Unitarian, if not mistaken. I'm not entirely sure, but the point is that he's not a Muslim. He's some type of Christian, and yet he admits to our sort of reading and how we would read the text, which is not a worldly type of dominance. So let's play this clip quickly. So basically, there's this Catholic apologist that was trying to run essentially this argument, and this is the Christian who replies.
And the unbelievers. In fact, a lot of, in fact, it's funny because in early Islam, that was precisely the argument that the Muslims were making in favor of Islam. If we must be the true religion, because look at how much success we're having. So in a sense, you can see Quran is back projecting that same argument onto the first century disciples.
Well, I want to make a distinction here, because you can say that their prevailing takes place in this life, But to say that it's a matter of their numeric superiority in comparison to their theological rivals is something else altogether. Because presumably the refusal to go along with, the high Christology trend and to put a second alongside God and so on, that also happens in this life. So you can say that their prevailing happens in this life, but it doesn't follow that it's a matter of the expanse of their religion in comparison. I just think those are two different things.
So I want to come in on this point. So
Yes, sir, guys. So as you can see, even a Christian admits to the sort of reading that's plausible from the text. Okay, so getting that out of the way, I'm not someone to interpret the Quran. This verse isn't entirely clear in what it's saying. Let's back it up from classical tafsirs. So we have in Al-Baghawi's tafsir. I'm just going to be using Al-Baghawi for this for these set of verses. So on chapter 3, verse 55, this is what he says. Oh, this is a continuation. Let me bring the other one first. Okay. Okay, so he says, so this is chapter 3, verse 55. And we are making those who followed you superior to those who disbelieved until the day of resurrection. So from the time of Jesus till the day of resurrection, the followers of Jesus will be superior. Now, what type of superiority is this? Well, Baghawi gives a ton of different interpretations. And Baghawi comes in, I think, at around the 4th or 5th century after the Prophet, peace be upon him, but he's giving us earlier interpretations than him. So we got Qatada and we got Muqattil. These are like early generation Muslims from the Salaf, or from the time of the Salaf. So Qatada, Rabi', Sha'bi, Muqattil, and Kalbi said they are the people of Islam who believed in him and followed his religion of monotheism from the nation of Muhammad, peace be upon him. They are superior to those who disbelieved, dominant and prevailing through honor, protection, and evidence. Okay, so the superiority here is in terms of honor, protection, and evidence, and this is about the nation of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's about us, right? That so it includes the followers of Jesus at the time, as well as us as well that followed Isa alayhi salam. And then there's another interpretation saying that it refers to the disciples who are superior to those who disbelieved. And obviously, as we know, the disciples didn't have military gain. They didn't have the sort of expansionist, obviously, preaching of the religion where the majority were believing. They were a small group. So there's that view as well. And even if someone was going to take the interpretation of worldly gain, Baghawi gives us an interpretation for that as well. So some that said it was a worldly gain, he says they are the people of Rome, and it is said it refers to the Christians who are superior to the Jews until the day of resurrection. For the Jews have lost their dominion, while the dominion of the Christians will last until near the establishment of the hour. According to this interpretation, following here refers to a claim of affiliation and love, not adherence to the religion. So in early tafsir, Al-Baghawi from the 4th or 5th century makes it clear that following here, if you're going to take this interpretation of worldly gain, does not refer to faith, but rather refers to following in terms of association. Okay, so they already made this distinction very early on, the early classical Mufassirin. And we can bring up, I don't want to make this live too long, so let me just skim through this quickly. Okay, so then for chapter 61, verse 14, Ibn Abbas gives us his interpretation of this text. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can pause the video and read it. He basically says that this verse applies to the nation of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, so similar to Muqattil and all the other interpretations that we got early on from chapter 3, verse 55. Essentially Ibn Abbas says that this is referring to the nation of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ when it says that the believers will triumph or be victorious or dominate and so on. And even on this point, as we can see, there's like an openness to a view that it's just in terms of honorific status or belief, or the fact that their status on the day of judgment will be higher than the others, right? So as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, that the only thing that distinguishes you between a believer or between two people will be your taqwa. So we know this clearly from the Quran and Hadiths, that the distinction between one person and another is merely on grounds of taqwa, merely on the grounds of God consciousness. So the status here, or the elevation here, may be in that aspect. So let's finish this article quickly, because I do have to go soon. I don't want to make this live too long. So hopefully those tafsirs prove to be helpful for you guys, inshallah. We have records of all kinds of groups. So yeah, essentially, before I continue, we don't grant this interpretation, even if we say this is in terms of the superiority here is in terms of worldly dominance. The early Mufassirin always interpreted this as a following in association, not following in religion. And secondly, the vast majority of the classical scholars early on from the Salaf interpreted this in terms of being the nation of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, or referring to the disciples in terms of status and proofs and evidences and God consciousness, not in terms of actual worldly dominance. So we have records of all kinds of groups, Gnostics like the Valentinians, and Marcionites, Jewish sects like the Christian heresies like the Arians, but on supposed true Islamic followers of Jesus, crickets. No, so you have remnants from the Ebionites. I already said this. All you can give is that they believed in the crucifixion. Well, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says that that's not a be or end all. You could still be a Muslim even if you believed in the crucifixion. Before the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, obviously. Then he basically says, he gives like an argument that presupposes an interpretation on these two verses, which we don't grant, obviously. So this argument doesn't follow. Now let's talk about the Ebionites. Dean's supposed answer to this, are they the true followers of Allah? I say no, mostly because they rejected the virgin birth. Dean counters, but wait, some did. First off, I never said they're monolithic. But you didn't mention the reason why you said that they don't apply is because of the virgin birth. You're so deceptive. Wallahi, this guy's deceptive. Have a look at what he says on why the Ebionites don't classify as Muslims, or not possibly as being Muslims. Okay. So what does he say when he mentions the Ebionites? Have a look.
True followers of Allah don't believe that the creator of this world is evil, so they're definitely out. The best candidate left over is the Ebionites. They're a small sect from the 2nd century, and we only know a little bit about them because Christians published criticisms about their beliefs. The information that we have, though, is pretty patchy according to scholars.
The fact that the only
Okay, let me continue that.
Absolutely not. Some of them were actually Gnostics, and others of them rejected Jesus' virgin birth. They created their own version of Jesus and rejected the real Jesus. True followers of Allah don't reject Allah's messengers, so they're also out.
All right, there you go. His justification was what? Because some of them were Gnostics, and some of them rejected the virgin birth. Well, what about the ones that aren't Gnostics and they don't reject the virgin birth? You didn't clarify that in your video. That's why I believe you're deceptive.
Out.
wait, not
Yeah, there you go. So and then actually, that's pretty funny, the fact that I animated that. I give like references here, and I bring up like Origin and Eusebius. The fact that they say that a group of them actually did affirm the fact that Jesus was born of a virgin. So there you go, bro. Those are your Muslims, based on your criteria. So let's finish this up, inshallah. I know they have diverse beliefs. Yes, you are hiding that. You didn't mention a refutation to those who don't reject the virgin birth. You didn't say, oh, well, the reason why these guys aren't Muslim is because whatever, right? I'm assuming you're going to say a reason here, but you didn't make that clear to your audience, right? And a lot of people are going to watch that video and just assume that the Ebionites are either one, not Muslims because they reject the virgin birth, or two, they weren't possibly classified as Muslims because they were Gnostics. You did not mention another point on why the only plausible candidate of being Muslim, as you yourself admitted, you did not give a reason why a group of them that fit in Islamic criteria don't actually fit it. So yeah, you were hiding that actually. You're being quite deceptive. But here's the problem: their diversity actually makes things worse, not better. Most Ebionites reject the. Where do you get that from? Where do you get that most reject the virgin birth? Eusebius doesn't say that, nor does Origen. And you only mentioned Eusebius here. I mentioned Origen. Most Ebionites reject the virgin birth, though yes, Eusebius notes that a few accepted. Okay, let's have a look at that. Well, firstly, Eusebius comes a lot later than Origen. So even if Eusebius says a few, Origen's a better candidate. He's a better source to look towards. Also, there's criticisms on Eusebius's reliability itself. So I would opt Origen as being a better source. But regardless, we can have a look at that reference, but I don't really have the time now. That's the only issue. Well, I'll try to find it quickly. That's not some gotcha moment. It doesn't help the case with the Quran's true followers. Some believe that Jesus was merely human, while Christ was a spiritual being who descended upon them to others, according to Irenaeus, even though they so we're dealing with a scattered group that couldn't agree on the basic doctrines, other than Jesus, not God, and Paul's bad, and held some strange non-proto-Muslim sounding beliefs. The idea that such a fragmented, theologically divergent sect could represent the Quran's true followers of Jesus is a massive stretch. Why would it be a massive stretch? I don't understand why it would be a massive stretch. You know, the funny thing is, as he will mention later on, that there's he believes in the Trinity, right? But there's no one before the Council of Nicaea that actually affirmed the Trinity. So you have zero continuity there historically, and yet you want to claim that you beliefs go back to Jesus and the disciples. So that's a funny double standard there. But for us, at least, we can give you a historical backing. We can show you that no, actually, there's a group here that affirmed Islamic beliefs. And yet, all you have to say for that is, oh, well, they weren't a monolith. They held two different types of views. Okay, so what? The point of your video was that show me one Muslim group. Well, here you go. Here's a plausible Muslim group. And now you just reject, you keep shifting the goalposts, right? This is why you get like absolutely destroyed in the debate, because people will recognize this. They recognize you constantly shifting the goalpost. And again, let's not forget the Quran's promise that Jesus' true followers were supposed to be dominant and superior. Dominant, superior, the Ebionites were anything but. They were a tiny, irrelevant sect with no historical influence, no lasting impact, and zero connection to the Quran's claim of dominance. Trying to use the Ebionites as true followers, like Mormons, clinging to scraps of evidence, the Israelites, the Ebionites are theological right test. We know so little about them for certain, objecting them as your answer. Okay. Another point is, well, the Quran, as I mentioned before, we already debunked this. Actually, a Christian, I played a clip from a Christian before that debunked this. And yeah, whether it's desperate or not, whether there's hardly any evidence or not, it meets the criteria that you suggested. It's better than you guys not being able to show me one Trinitarian. Right? Look at this double standard now. I'm giving you a historical source where they affirm Islamic beliefs, and James Tabor, as well as many other scholars, affirm that this Jewish type of Christianity most likely links back to the historical Jesus. Jesus wouldn't believe that he came to die for people's sins, or that he was going to be resurrected, or that he was divine, or any of these things. This actually links back to the historical Jesus. Right? So I'm not just giving you some desperate take. This is actually a strong historical case to be made that the Ebionites tradition are linked to the historical Jesus' teachings. And it gets even more awkward by what little accounts we do have. The Ibn believe Jesus was crucified. He believed that the Quran finally denies. And here's the wild part: Deen is more than likely more than okay with Jesus' followers being completely mistaken about the crucifixion, because he can find some Muslim commentators claiming that's fine. Apparently, Allah is okay with his followers believing something he would later have to go out of his way to strongly correct, an event that became central to what Islam considers blasphemous and worship. What? Jesus being crucified has nothing to do with him being divine. For 300 years, no one believed in the Trinity. There was the crucifixion. Actually, the point here could be made that the Ebionites did not deify Jesus, and yet they believed in the crucifixion. So how does this even follow? That it follows some sort of blasphemous worship, or it follows from the crucifixion that there's the Trinity, or whatever it might be. But suddenly the virgin birth is seemingly treated as a non-negotiable line in the sand. Why? Because that's the only way to force the Ebionites into a half-decent fit for the Quran's true followers. It's arbitrary and exposes just how weak this argument really is. What I'm missing? No, it's not arbitrary, because Jesus's you could say doppelganger incident, where he was swapped on the cross, that wouldn't have been preached by Jesus, nor do we have any indication in the Quran or Hadiths that this would have been taught to the disciples. So you can give a sort of excuse there and say that's not something that God revealed through revelation at the time, but only later revealed. Okay, so that's different to the fact that Jesus would have been born of a virgin. Mary would have said that she was born of a virgin, that she gave birth as a virgin, and that Jesus would have been known as a person who doesn't have a father. He just has a mother. So it's very different. One would have been preached and taught through like tradition, while the other, there's no clear indication at all from anyone that this was the case until the Quran came. You're comparing apples and oranges. Now, flip the script. Imagine if I claimed the Orthodox Christian position was what Jesus really taught, but all I had to back it up was hundreds of years of silence. That's literally what you have. You don't have anyone teaching the Trinity from the early church fathers pre-Nicaea. Justin Martyr says there's another God. Irenaeus says Jesus has less knowledge than the Father. You have Irenaeus saying that you can't call Jesus the true God. You can only call the Father the true God. And if that anyone taught other than that, there would have been a teacher of transgression. You have Tertullian believing that the Son had a beginning and that he was subordinate to the Father. Same thing with Origen. Same thing with Eusebius. So you do actually have this hundreds of years of silence, which is ironic. And a fringe group described by outsiders that was divided and didn't align with orthodoxy. Well, you didn't even have that. You didn't even have this fringe group in your narrative. In your narrative, you have literally no one. No one before Nicaea. You laugh at me, and right? Yeah, I literally would laugh at you right now because you hold to that view. Yeah, when you do I'm the clown, that's some serious projecting. On the contrary, we have the Gospels and Acts, we have the New Testament epistles, and we have all the writings of the early fathers, all the evidence is on our side. No, the Gospels don't preach the divinity of Jesus, nor does Acts, nor does the New Testament epistles, nor does the writings of the ante-Nicene fathers, ANTE, so before Nicaea. All the evidence is not stacked on your side because none of this proves the divinity of Jesus. I'll debate you on that. The truth is the Ebionites fell on every level. They weren't unified. Okay, your video never claimed that they had to be unified. And why do I even have to find a group that is unified? We have zero documents from their perspective. We only have people from the Christian side documenting what they believed. And we don't have anything from the first century about them. So why would I see this as problematic? History at times will not give you clear pictures of certain groups or certain perspectives. Why should that be a reason for us to now doubt our religion? Our religion gives us definitive truths. History at times will be muddy. That's fine. Can you find any historical evidence that Moses existed, that Abraham existed? There's no historical evidence for that outside of the Bible. So stop being a hypocrite. They weren't dominant. Okay, well, you're misinterpreting what dominant means, as we explained. and their beliefs don't align with the Quran's claims. The only thing you mentioned that I've conceded to is the crucifixion, and Ibn Taymiyyah, who's not just a Islamic commentator, he's Shaykh al-Islam, one of the greatest scholars, probably the greatest scholar in our tradition, backing up what I'm saying, that it's fine if they didn't believe in the crucifixion, it wouldn't undermine their faith. They still wouldn't be considered Muslims. Trying to make them fit isn't just grasping at straws, it's clutching at air. Yeah, that's just what you think, but I've clearly debunked everything in this article. And then there's the core problem. Dean fails to understand the difference. No, I do know the difference. Like we already showed this. He acts as if I think all arguments of silence are created equal, but the Quran says clear expectations. Yeah, so he's just presupposing, like he's begging the question on that dominant Jesus followers point. He didn't even mention this in his original video. That's fine. We still managed to debunk it. So if anyone wants to come up for like 5 minutes, we can do that. But other than that, I'm gonna end the live here. If someone wants to come up in the next 5 minutes, I'll let you come up because I still got about 5 minutes before I have to get off. So there's the link. If you have any questions about what I said or any contentions, just you can come up. I'm just gonna leave it there for about 5 minutes, inshallah. In the Bible, Jesus never once claimed to be God. Dan McClellan upcoming book has a chapter on that, even verses like John 10. Yeah, I definitely agree. Dean, where you from? From Australia. Bro, I just hopped on. Yeah, you can replay the video, inshallah. Just gave a thorough refutation of his article. Okay, guys, if no one's gonna... Okay, this a couple that came up. Just one question, one quick question, and one quick comment, and then I'm gonna have to move on to the next person because there's another person waiting behind you, Ismail. So just quick question, quick comment, then I'll get Bilal on as well. Quick question, quick comment, and then I'm gonna have to end the video there. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I have a questions. Sorry, English is not my first language. I have a difficulty.
No, you're good. You're good.
I have a questions about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the Quran, it is written that Allah has two right hands. In the Hadith,
Yeah,
it is written
I'm
that
sorry,
Allah
Ismail.
has.
It's yeah, I'm sorry, Ismail. Just add me up on Discord. It's gonna be the same username as my YouTube. Dean responds. I'll add you back. I can answer your questions. You can DM me it. Then, inshallah, I'll respond to it. It's just really irrelevant to the video. So I'm gonna have to add up Bilal because I don't have much time. So just add up my Discord and I'll add you back, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. يا دين كيف حالك؟
I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
All well, alhamdulillah. Just want first off, just want to say, may Allah reward you for the good work you do for dawah. It's really important for having this kind of knowledge you present, especially with the kind of content. Alhamdulillah. My question rather is about the Ebionites. Is there something like, are they like, how do I say, a group that was consistently like have a tradition from according to like the sources that we are available? Do we know that they were like a continuous group, or were they like gaps essentially with where you find them here, over here in different parts of the world at different times during the between Isa alayhi salam and Muhammad Rasul?
Yeah, so you will find like many diverse views from them, but the essence of what they would have taught can be found like in the New Testament. So you can see like whatever usually goes against the core teachings of what Jesus is teaching in the New Testament, you can kind of pick that out and say, okay, there's a deviation here. So the core essence of what they would have historically believed and what they would have taught that would have traced back to Jesus would have been, following the law, believing Jesus to be a prophet, the Messiah, not God, as well as them being a group that believed in the virgin birth, although some didn't believe in it, which is fine. You still find others that believe in it. There's a lot of them are going to have like different traditions, different groups having different sort of beliefs, but like amongst like historical critical scholars like James Tabor and like other historical critics, most people say that the Ebionites, the Jewish Christians, have the closest link historically to what Jesus would have actually taught, which is follow the law, worship the one true God. Not this whole business of him being divine and so on. That's a later projection onto the Bible and like the historical Jesus.
I see. Okay, understood. So they're like according to even this Western scholars, they'd be the most accurate to the early teachings of Jesus, as well.
Yep.
Okay, I see. Also, actually, just remind me. I think I remember something about dialogue with Trifo by Justin Martyr. I don't know if it was you or Jake that mentioned that was reading a passage where Justin mentions that there's some followers among his church that don't believe that the Messiah is God, divine whatsoever. He's just a man among men. But from Justin Martyr, his attitude was like, oh, they're okay. They're part of my church. The only thing that you need to be saved is just believe that Jesus was Messiah, essentially. So
yeah, so that probably was Jake. I've read that from his works, but I haven't looked too deeply in the context of what he was saying. I can't give you like a clear, detailed answer on that because I haven't actually used it before, but I do know what you're talking about. Jake probably brought it up, not myself. But I have heard that claim before, but I'm not the person that can give you a detailed answer on that because I don't really use it.
Okay, understood. Those were all of my like comments and questions I had at the moment. But it was alhamdulillah. Thanks for bringing me on. May Allah continue with the da'wah work. It's very alhamdulillah interesting. I'm sorry. Also, just a comment. I can't really. I don't really give anybody money to support, but I will try to give comments and notifications.
Jazakallah khair for that. You don't have to do it, but just dua and just liking the video and sharing it. Inshallah, that's all good. Like if you can go that extra step, alhamdulillah. Like I appreciate it a lot, and may Allah reward you for that.
If the rule, I have a rule for myself. I don't donate to anyone I don't know for 3 years. So I just recently discovered you. So inshallah, I'll stay with you for a couple of years. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah, sounds good. But yeah, inshallah, you benefited from the video and from others. But I think that's gonna be it. I already said I was gonna do 2 people, then just quick questions, and I'll have to leave. I'm already like 10 minutes beyond what I could have done, so I really have to get going. But yeah, jazakallah khair for the support. And inshallah, guys, I'll be uploading tomorrow, most likely in response to Testify again, actually, on the Islamic dilemma. So watch out for that. So yeah, inshallah, we will do that tomorrow. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.